The Greensburg tornado was life-changing.
Being able to look back at it now, 15 years, I can't believe it's going to be that long.
There's no book on how to recover from something like this, so.
When I was 10 years old, the first tornado ever designated as an EF5 leveled the town of Greensburg, Kansas. The base was nearly 2 miles wide, larger than Greensburg itself. My grandparents lived there. This is a picture of my grandparents' old house. If we can find the big well, then we know we're close. I've been down in the big well more times than I can count. There was like a meteorite in the Big Well Museum. I specifically remember just that huge, massive rock. And I thought that was the coolest thing. My grandma used to work at the Big Well. That was before the tornado transformed this small Kansas town. I mean, you can just still see the scars. You can just see that like the paint still ripped off. And everyone who lived here. Gosh, like look at that house. Like, it's sad. Oh wait. Hold on, my dad's calling me. Hey, yeah, so we're headed to the house. Are you almost there?
Yeah, Greensburg's inside of. We're about 3 miles to the east of it right now.
Well, I'll see you guys probably in the next like 10, 15 minutes or so.
Alrighty, all right, bye-bye.
Bye. But before I tell you that story of the days after the tornado, of how I helped my family sift through the rubble, looking for their friends, their memories, and how a deep fear began to grow inside me.
Come here, Rory.
You should hear how it started from the people who lived through it.
Greensburg, a typical small Kansas town struggling with, declining population. We had about 1,400 people at that time. It's a good place to live.
Small little community, probably everybody knew everybody's business. You felt blessed to raise a family and be a part of.
Getting out, riding your bike to a friend's house, riding your bike to the pool. I just loved how everything was accessible by bike or foot any time of the year.
Greensburg had an old-time soda jerk where I gulped down cherry vanilla Coke floats, a movie theater founded by my great-uncle, a donut shop once owned by my grandmother, and streets lined with shade.
You knew it because it had big old trees everywhere.
Before the tornado, Greensburg had 2 claims to fame. Here you could find the world's largest hand-dug well and the world's largest palisite meteorite ever found. It's literally a space rock from the asteroid belt. That tells you 2 things: that the town was built by hard work and that it's touched by the extraordinary every now and then. Unfortunately, that includes some serious weather. Greensburg sits right in the heart of Tornado Alley. Cold, dry air from the Rockies clashes with warm, moist air from the Gulf of Mexico. That mix is volatile, developing supercells that can spawn tornadoes.
The day of the tornado, May the 4th, was a Friday in 2007, and the clouds started moving in. And the air started feeling really heavy and funny, and we noticed the animals. We had a bulldog at that time and a couple cats. They were acting very strange.
It was unsettled all day. You could, the barometric pressure was low. You could tell that, you hear the pipes gurgling like under the sink where the trap is.
Kind of an eerie feeling. Of course, no idea what kind of eerie feeling that really meant.
It was always windy. It was always, storms, but that day was a little different. It was, you pay attention to the weather day.
Skies were getting pretty dark and pretty heavy, and again, you just felt like there was, kind of bad weather on the way.
We had a very high chance of tornadic activity that night, so we were kind of aware something might happen, and the weather that day was just really, it was different.
Meteorologists use what we call a significant tornado parameter to predict violent outbreaks. On the STP, anything greater than a 1 is considered significant. Over Greensburg, the STP was at a 7. Ray Stegman was and still is the emergency manager for Greensburg. The night of the tornado, he was just west of town.
The sheriff's office, fire department, emergency manager, those just first responders basically go out and look for tornadoes.
9:17 p.m. The National Weather Service out of Dodge City issues a tornado warning for the areas near Greensburg. They were tracking a large and extremely dangerous tornado that was located just 14 miles south of town.
I could see it on the radar as it crossed the county line.
Forecast came over and said there was a tornado moving north at 50 miles an hour.
We turned regular TV on, and of course that red at the bottom of the screen of all the warnings, you know, this is serious.
Got a call late into the evening suggesting that things had gone from bad to worse.
Ross Jansen is the chief meteorologist at KWCH in Wichita, whose viewing area includes Greensburg. The days leading up to the tornado, Ross had been tracking the potential for a severe weather outbreak.
The National Weather Service in Dodge City has issued a tornado warning for Cuyahoga County in south central Kansas. National Weather Service meteorologists were tracking a confirmed large and extremely dangerous tornado 14 miles south of Greensburg. The safest place to be during a tornado is in a basement. Use blankets or pillows to cover your body. This is an extremely dangerous and life-threatening situation.
There's multiple tornadoes!
On the night of May 4th, train spotters and storm chasers were on the outskirts of town, just hoping to capture a glimpse of the storm. What they saw was shocking. 9:28 p.m. The National Weather Service updates their warning to include an extremely dangerous and life-threatening situation.
This is not good. This is big. Once the tornado crossed the county line, that's when I had dispatch turn on the sirens. And I think it was Andrea that asked, how long do you want me to set them for? And I said, leave them on till I tell you to turn them off.
The National Weather Service issues a tornado emergency for Greensburg. The extremely large and life-threatening tornado was headed directly for the town.
We reserve those tornado emergencies for when it's a for sure thing that a town is likely going to take a direct hit. And the highest level of warning that we can put out to the public.
I was sitting on a porch swing. I could see that tornado. In fact, I could see it.
Well, the only light was lightning, except for a car down the street here that a tree fell on and shorted the battery out a little, or the lights, and it was going beep, beep, beep. My wife will tell you, I was the one that was always, when I heard the tornado sirens go off, go out to the back alley and see what's coming. I had the sense that no, this wasn't the time, that this was the real deal.
I was playing Xbox, I mean, as all probably freshman guys did on a Friday night. The tornado sirens went off.
The sirens went off. And I was like, okay. I was nervous. I said, okay, should we go to the basement now?
This was a big old wedge, great big wide base on it, you know, several miles wide. And it was black and just coming straight north of Greensburg. It was the biggest one I'd ever seen. I thought we were in trouble. I really did. We got Greensburg dead centered. We better go to Storm's cave.
It's right here, he said. What do you want to save?
And then the power went out.
We could look to the southeast, and that's where we could see the backside of the tornado was right here. And that's shortly after that was when we started hearing the radio traffic of people's houses actually being destroyed.
Greensburg taking direct hit at this time.
Some of the other firemen actually had handheld radios. Some of the wives were screaming on the radio saying their houses were being destroyed.
Myself and my family are trapped in my basement, and I think we have a gas leak.
Watched it as it come through. There was another tornado that was to the south of us that was actually going east. So we stayed north of it. This one was going north. So we just kind of stayed to the west of it until we thought we'd get into town, and it was still there.
It sounded like bowling balls hitting the house.
It sounded like a squadron of jets breaking the sound barrier at the same time. It just kaboom. The house even shook.
As we were going into the shelter, I was the last one, and as I pulled the door, I realized that there was a pressure that pulled on that door, and that probably meant that it was sucking the house, away from the foundation. That was pretty scary. I'm of course, obviously Christian women, and I have a feeling that probably we couldn't hear too much because I was praying pretty loud. But it was, and then the pressure, I realized all of us were just standing there with our hands over our ears because the pressure was so great.
If you ever pulled an old nail out of yellow pine and hear it creak, multiply that by about 100,000 times. And I said, oh, Ann, I think we just lost the roof.
It was extremely loud, very loud. Of course, it's a lot of noise when the glass shatters and then the roof rips off, and it was an all brick house, so the bricks are, beating on the floor above us.
You just felt like you had to hold your ears because it was just so tight, so much pressure against your ears. You almost felt like your eardrums were going to pop or something. And yet there was this, I guess, roaring noise.
I could tell the tornado was really right on us. And it sounded like a waterfall that was very, very bad.
And that's when we proceeded to town after we heard everybody screaming on the radio that they needed help.
Terrifying. And then our neighbor Chris called. And at that point, I don't believe we had electricity, but we still had the landline. And he said, I'm sending Kelsey and the baby over.
And the wind just kept getting louder. And power went out and it started hailing very hard, real hard.
You could hear it. Dad went up the stairs.
They had about a 9-month-old son. They were going to come over because they didn't have a basement. In my mind, I was thinking it's too late, but I didn't have the heart to tell him that. So I ran back up the steps out onto the deck and was waiting for him to come out, but nobody came out of the house next door.
And I was kind of keeping an eye on him, and he was standing out on the deck, yelling for Kelsey, looking for her, shining a flashlight. And then it got really bad.
Things were blowing off the deck and things were blowing over the house. I was on the downwind side of the house. I was holding the door shut, and then the glass shattered on the south side of the house. So all I could think of was keep going, don't stop. And went on down, and Lindy was there.
And then you could hear the house start, I assume, coming apart, windows and bricks. And I said, what do we do? And he said, get in the bathtub. So we got in the bathtub, and he was kind of covering me. He said, I waited. I waited as long as I could. I waited as long as I could for Kelsey. And I said, well, we just have to pray for him. I said, let's pray for him.
I was frantic because I felt like I'd left our neighbors to die.
Most of the top floor was gone though. So what was floor to ceiling windows behind us, I remember we kind of hopped out of them or over the glass and went almost immediately to Kelsey's house. Where are they? At first we thought it was just kind of our south end of town that was hit.
Actually, it was the whole town. It was my grandparents' old house, and my dad grew up in this, lived in this house. So it's a really well-built house. I remember playing along that rock wall, and my grandma had a bunch of vegetables. She would garden out there. Hello! But this isn't just a story about a storm. It's about friends and neighbors who became heroes in the confusion and the darkness. It's about faith, about prayers answered, and what home actually means. And it's the beginning of my own weather story.
Kendall, this is your journal that I found in the basement in one of our boxes that hadn't seen the light of day for years, honestly.
Yeah, that's my handwriting. It's obviously not good, but I was 10 at the time. So my grandparents were hit by the Greensburg tornado. Something sad and scary to think about was that I was just there on spring break, so everything was still fresh in my mind. The tornado may have taken the town away from you, but no one will be able to take away your memories. And I was too young to understand, and I was scared. Because all I knew was that you guys were okay, but when you're 10 and you see something like that, it's gonna stick with you.
Inside the state-of-the-art studio.
We're streaming 24/7 to show you what's happening in real time.
When storms hit, more people watch Fox Weather.
Because when you need reliable information,
you look to the best. And nobody has you covered like Fox Weather.
Because where else could you learn moves like this?
Keep telling yourself that.
Precise, personal, powerful.
From across the country
to just around the corner.
Fox Weather. Stream live now on your favorite device.
A tornado with winds over 200 miles per hour had just plowed through Greensburg, Kansas, and practically no home was spared.
When it was over, I stood up, and there was no walls, there was no floor above us, no roof, nothing.
Our stairs come up and face the north, and that's the path of the tornado. So when I came up out of the stairs, I remember a lightning strike and still seeing the tornado north of town, which I shouldn't have because there were trees there, but they weren't there anymore.
I found some clean, dry jeans and pulled them on, and a pair of old rubber hunting boots came up to just below my knees, and I looked more like Jed Clampett. The roof was gone, and June's bedroom, the west wall was gone, and of course her whole roof was gone, and it was just a terrific mess, it really was.
So the house is gone, so there's quite a bit of town's gone. You just push that back and you stay focused on, I'm okay.
It was hard to comprehend because we could look up the stairway and see rain blowing by for a while. And then when we went outside, of course, most of the house was gone and neighbors' houses were destroyed. And then the one north of us where Kelsey and her baby were was pretty much completely gone. It was a nice, fairly new, all brick house built on a slab, and it was pretty much all gone. There was a small pile of rubble, so I was pretty sure they were dead. A pile of rubble not much larger than this coffee table, and all of a sudden a voice came out there and said, "Please get me out of here, I have my baby."
And they started through the bricks and whatever rubble was there.
He started pulling debris off the pile, rubble off the pile. Pretty soon he pulled some debris back, and there was this little boy, 9-month-old boy, laying there with his eyes this big around, like that was a wild ride, but he wasn't crying. And we picked him up and looked him all over, and there wasn't a cut or a scratch on him anywhere. And then pulled some more debris off the rubble and got his mom out, and she was just fine. She remembers being terrified. She had started to come out the door to come to our house and couldn't get the door open. We both agreed the good Lord was holding the door shut because it was too late. And she pulled a mattress up in front of the closet, and they got into a closet.
They handed me this baby, and looking back at it now, I thought, oh my gosh, how unnatural, but I just kind of wrapped him up.
I believe that was the good Lord protecting them. There's the age-old question of why here, not somewhere else, but I believe that happened. I always thought miracles were something that happened somewhere else that other people got to see, but I believe that day that was a miracle. I believe that was the good Lord protecting them. The whole time we were in the basement, I was scared, and I was asking God to protect us because I thought we were going to get covered up. Lindy never prayed for us. She kept praying out loud, asking Jesus to protect our neighbor and her baby the whole time. I don't know about you, but she was 13 at the time. My wife was very good at parenting. I'm not, so I always, hope I haven't messed my kids up. And just never expected my best moment as a parent, as a father, never expected my best moment to come at a time like that.
Many of the people of Greensburg were people of faith, and so even before the sun rose the next day, their prayers for help were first answered in the form of those who sat beside them on Sundays. Mitzi Hesser was one of those people. As a public health nurse for Kiowa County, she rushed to help.
I looked at those people and realized these were all people I knew, and none of them had homes. And that was us also. And that became pretty hard for those first moments to try to understand, well, now what were we going to do? Because we're all just sitting here with nothing but the clothes on our back.
Everybody just started working their way to the center of town. Whatever they had left, that's what they were coming to the lights with.
My cell phone rang. It was Jean, my wife, and she said, "You okay?" And I said, "Yeah, we're okay. Please call my parents and tell them we're okay." She says, "What about the house?" And I said, "These calls drop pretty quick. Please call my parents, tell them we're okay." And later on, she said, "You didn't tell me the house was gone." And I got to thinking about it. At that point in time, we were all standing out there in the street, uninjured, and I really didn't care about the house at that point in time.
When Dodge City was coming over and Pratt, their EMS people and emergency management, they sent out the notice that bring all the body bags you got. Because just from seeing the devastation.
We couldn't speak because we were just dumbfounded because everything was destroyed. Something we could not have visualized before. To have something of that magnitude go over, and there we were, all neighbors and all of us were still okay. The material things didn't matter quite as much.
It was like a Halloween scene. All you could see is trees just with nothing on them. No buildings, nothing like that. We were just basically waiting on a witch to fly by on a broom, because that's kind of what it looked like. The sun was just starting to come up, so it was just, all we could see is just stripped trees.
We just kind of started roaming to see who we could help. You're walking through your town, but you don't recognize it. Like all the landmarks that you're used to seeing, like so-and-so's house on that corner. The park should be right down after this house, but I don't see that house anymore.
I pulled in there with my pickup, and I just stopped and looked and thought just that. Man, this really happened. What do we do now?
I went to a little bar that was just across the street from that Dillon's where they were using it.
That bar still exists, the building anyway.
That night of the tornado, it was one of the few buildings that still was kind of standing. And when I got to the highway here, they asked me if I would just go ahead and triage there. And so they sent me over here, and they were sending people here who possibly needed some help or maybe needed some first aid. And so the people that kept coming in, I couldn't find water, I couldn't find anything to help them. Some of them wanted to take medicine or something, so we finally just opened up cans of beer because it was the only thing I could find to get some, for us to drink. And so we took care of the people.
The other counties were actually hearing our radio traffic, and they were responding before we even asked for help or before we even got hit. We actually had, if I remember, ordered 2 semis, reefer trucks, and 400 body bags, thinking we were going to have that kind of death with this thing. But we were very fortunate that that didn't happen.
The storm had taken 10 lives, but if not for the warnings from the National Weather Service, broadcast meteorologists, and trained spotters like Ray, it could have been much worse.
The shelters saved a lot of lives, and despite the destruction and the loss of life in Greensburg, there's still an overwhelming message of success that came out of that night.
At the time, that success seemed like a hollow victory.
The only way you could see town was through the lightning flashes. And it was just kind of like, oh, what are we going to find in the morning?
What they found was hard to comprehend.
Started praying and said, Lord, we're coming home.
How heavy are these?
About 36,000 pounds. And they actually picked them up. That's the other thing. The tornadoes actually picked them up, and I'll show you over here where they rolled them in a ball. I just can't imagine a combine weighing that much being lifted in the air high enough to come down and do that kind of damage. It just blows my mind.
This cellar saved my family's life and myself. It's the best room in my house.
We'll be back. I don't know how long it'll take, but it'll be back. We'll be back.
Will you be better?
I hope to be better. I hope it will be better.
Tracking hurricane season.
I need you to listen up. This one is something we have to watch.
When every moment matters.
Visibility is very low. I just want to show you the power of this wind right now.
We've got you covered.
This is something we are keeping an eye on.
Some of these storms are really going to be fairly intense.
With powerful reporting.
All of this energy making it to the East Coast.
This is where the center of that storm is now.
And precision analysis.
That's the biggest controlling factor in how many hurricanes.
Hurricane season. Stay with Fox Weather for every moment.
The monster storm, nearly 2 miles wide, had flattened Greensburg. It lifted a 1,000-pound meteorite and tossed it like a pebble.
This is a treasure, a town treasure. It's been here since 1949, and and hopefully we'll rebuild and make it a centerpiece of a tourist attraction again.
Some areas of town, like the houses were just foundations.
Cement crumbled and fell down on my head. I thought, well, I'm getting my money's worth, earthquake and a tornado at the same time. I said some words you don't learn in church, I'll tell you for sure.
We were just south of a convenience store, and a semi-truck that had parked there to weather the storm was now in our backyard, peeked through my window. And that was easy because the whole east wall was gone. Like someone had taken a butter knife, because I had a dresser right up next to that wall that was still standing. All my clothes were still in it. Nothing had came up. My Xbox was actually on that dresser, and my Xbox was still there, and it still worked. I played it all summer.
One young man came running down to see if we needed help, and we said, well, how come they don't send some help down to this end of town? He said, well, the whole town's destroyed. And we said, well, what about the fire station and the school? And he said, no, it's all destroyed. What about the hospital? No, it's all destroyed. Everything's gone.
The courthouse survived. It stood. It was severely damaged. A huge skylight that was opened up. There was a blue car that rolled across the roof of the courthouse and took a whole section of roof off, skidded across the roof before it landed in the north yard. And they knew that it was that car that did the damage because of the blue skid marks on the roof.
As best they could tell, right down Main Street, right down the middle of town.
The tornado traveled almost due north. It was 1.7 miles wide, with winds that reached 205 miles per hour.
EF5 is the top of the tornado damage scale, the enhanced Fujita scale, and that scale was actually just launched prior to the Greensburg tornado. So Greensburg, historic for a number of reasons, is actually the first EF5 in the entire country, because we went from the Fujita scale to the enhanced Fujita scale, which is where EF comes into play.
In the coming weeks, the damage at the school would be the so-called star witness in making the EF5 determination. Damage to the brick structure and the collapse of the roof told engineers winds had topped 200 miles per hour, making it an EF5. And that massive storm was on the ground for quite some time.
Yeah, it actually went north of town about 2 miles and then started making a big left loop.
You can get a bird's eye view from the Skyland Grain Elevator, located just west of town. My family has been delivering grain here to market for decades and still does today. The Smiths grow hard red winter wheat and milo. The silos are more than 12 stories tall, 25 feet in circumference. That's a lot of breakfast cereal.
Can you show us and point the direction of what the path would have looked like night of the tornado?
So they're straight south down the highway here, 7-8 miles. There's some houses hit. And then as it came up, it was taking, so I understand, a northeasterly turn.
Standing on the highway there and seeing the first tornado, the big one, start doing its wrap up, and it had gone north and was coming back around towards town again. And it started back towards the southeast, back to town.
And you thought maybe it's coming back?
We didn't realize it was the same one.
Yeah.
We thought it was another one.
Oh, okay,
so
yeah.
we were just thinking, oh, there's another one coming. So
wow.
We had no idea it was the one making the loop.
Yeah.
Spinning out.
When it finally finished spinning out, word began to spread of what had happened. And then it reached my house.
On our side of the state, we were having a great time. It was very nice weather. We were at a dinner party. One of our daughters was at a middle school dance, and Kendall was with us. We were enjoying the night air, and then we came home, and that's when the phone rang. Any phone call after 9 is not a good phone call.
I answered the phone. It was my Uncle Charlie.
Kendall was immediately, oh, Uncle Charlie, how are you doing? What's going on? Normal stuff. And he cut her off. He said, hey, is your dad there? You know, and because I need to talk to him. And so I came to the phone. Hi, Charlie, how are you? And he goes, have you talked to your mom and dad? First words that left his mouth, have you talked to your mom and dad? And my answer was, no, not today. I did yesterday. And so he said, you need to turn on the news. And he said, they have been hit by a tornado. There's the first sucker punch to the gut.
They were talking about something strange happening with my grandfather, which didn't really surprise me. You see, my grandfather is unique.
Every family has that one uncle. And for the Smith family, it's Jerry.
I've known him for a long time. Henri? Can I say that? Yeah. He's Henri.
Had he been born in the 1880s, he would have been Wyatt Earp or Marshall Dillon, a man who cares a lot about his town and the people in it, and not one lick what they think of him. At 83, he's still driving his fire red Dodge Challenger, and he's still driving it way too fast.
Okay, stop.
I call him my Gee Daddy.
Gee Daddy.
What is Gee Daddy?
Beats the hell out of me.
He's the Gee Daddy. He's not the kind of man to go running to the storm cellar when the tornado sirens go off. So my father was a little worried.
I had no clue where my parents were. Karen was able to answer the phone. And she said, she confirmed, if we've been hit, the phone call would cut off in like a 10 to 12 second interval. So we were talking and it clicked. It's like, ah!
But it's hard to kill ornery.
I was a deputy sheriff for 22 years, and I was on the fire department for 27. I saw disasters all the time, and that kind of helped me. You can't do anything. All you got to do is pick up the pieces and go on. That's all you can do.
Probably just a little bit before midnight, and I was driving to Greensburg. I had this tremendous urge to speed. I mean, you just want to hammer down and get there. And it was at about 4:30 or 4:45 in the morning where I received a call from my wife, and she said that my mom had called. That was literally the best phone call I've ever had. I pulled over. I had to deal with it. I just had to deal with it.
My grandparents had survived, but their house had not.
Granted, the destruction is terrible, but the most important things are your family, your friends, your neighbors, the community. And so that was a huge lesson to be learned.
So my dad decided that we would all come out to help. Me, my sister, and my mom.
When people were finally let back in, it was just surreal for everybody. They just didn't know what to do. The rain, whatever was still there, the rain that we had ruined everything. So whatever was savable was just, it had tornado splat on everything. It's just muddy insulation, wood, debris, just splatted everywhere. And that's what people seen when they came in.
Either gone or covered in just the insulation. We learned that summer you cannot get that insulation, fiberglass insulation out of anything. We threw away so much stuff that we thought was good.
You just can't. No, you can't. They explained it, or they described it as, war zone, everything's gone, it's all shreds, there's nothing left. All those words were correct, but not until you see your community, not until you see that downtown, those big brick buildings, all just in shambles. You begin to realize that your community was not ever going to be the same.
I went to see the block I grew up on, and it was hard. The debris was everywhere in the yard, like a bomb had leveled the town.
So here's where the front of the house would have been. Remember, as a little girl riding my bike down that sidewalk, there was a blue spruce over here. It was completely leveled and laying flat in the yard. And then to the back of the house, there's still one thing that remains.
Yeah.
And that is my handprints.
Aww. I actually don't think I've ever seen this. And if I have, maybe it's been a long time.
This is about all that's left of the Smiths at 303 East Nebraska.
Oh my gosh, can you put your hand back in it? I know you got a glove on, but let's see. Aww. That's amazing. Wow. You left your mark on this house, for sure.
The roof was gone, not like the house I grew up in. It had yellow on what that was the final base. Some of that remained. I'm going, I don't remember my house being yellow.
A few days after the storm, I would write in my journal what I saw in Greensburg.
My grandparents, my great aunt and uncle, and my great grandma's houses were all destroyed.
The images would haunt me long after the tornado was gone, and I wasn't the only one.
I didn't want to come to town. I did struggle a lot, and I still do struggle with storms.
Hello, Fox
Fox Weather users, I'm Janice Dean. The Fox Weather app is changing the game with custom features you've got to take advantage of. I'm here to guide you through these features so you can get the most out of your Fox Weather experience. Let me tell you about my favorite feature on the Fox Weather app, Future View. Fox Future View is a feature you can't find anywhere else. With a few simple steps, Future View allows you to track the weather in advance of any big events you have planned for the year. Going on vacation? Booking your honeymoon? Maybe a destination wedding or party? This is the perfect tool to help you plan ahead. Get a future forecast anywhere in the world, nearly a year in advance. Here's how it works. Hit the Plan tab at the bottom of your screen. Then hit Create Event. Give it a name. Let's say Spring Break Trip. Then add a location, maybe to Miami. Pick a start and end date. Add a category, and turn on notifications so we can alert you as your event gets closer. Then click Create. That's it. Give it a try now. This is just one of many great features the Fox Weather app provides to you. This app is full of all kinds of great customizable tools. So dive in and make the Fox Weather app your very own. Fox Weather, precise, personal, powerful.
The town of Greensburg had been destroyed. It was like walking through a horror movie, because he said as he walked into town, you know, there was a lightning flash and you'd see that everything's destroyed over here and everything's destroyed over there.
The first ever tornado to be categorized as an EF5 left a path of destruction, even in places unseen.
After the tornado, I kind of shut down as far as like Greensburg goes. Like I just didn't want to be here. I didn't want to be dealing with it. I was more comfortable at my grandparents'. I didn't want to come to town. The tornado there was a smell. And that if you were here, you knew the tornado smell.
The returning of outsiders coming in with cameras all through high school wore on me. I just got burnt out pretty quick, and I was just ready to move on.
The wind blowing still to this day is nerve-wracking. That sets me on edge. A lot of us have gone through that, and a lot of us were still affected by it. There are a lot of kids affected by the tornado, by the storm, even if not directly. I mean, it changed our community. It changed our county.
I definitely lost a lot with and I don't know why. Like, I've never really thought about it, I guess.
Are we ever going to build back this town? You know, is there ever going to be anything? Are you ever going to be my neighbor again?
The rebuilding process began with a very special visit.
Here's a picture of President Bush.
Yeah.
Were you able to see him?
me.
This is right.
That's me with him. It's a.
Oh, wow.
Ann Dixon was magistrate judge for the county. She and her husband Bob lived next door to my grandparents, and their house had suffered a similar fate.
This is what our house looked like. This is the basement where we were at. The only clear spot after the tornado, that's the picture.
Oh, wow.
And that's what it looked like. The tornado not only sucked the house off the top of us, but the stairs that went down into the basement were pulled out too.
Yeah, I don't see any.
Her house was gone, but this was still her home.
We found out that the president was coming, and so different people in the community made signs, and Stacy, our daughter, and our daughters made that and hung it on the fireplace. He just came over and put his arm around me, and we just talked like we're doing, and he gave me a hug, and he was you could tell he was very moved, very touched by what had happened here, and that meeting people, he was trying to offer comfort. That's how we felt. Even though we had lost everything, and we had lost neighbors a half a block to the south and a half a block northeast of us, we were alive, and we had not only the ability but the responsibility.
We may have lost 95% of our town, but we were there.
I was interviewed a couple days after the tornado and with other public officials, and people said, "Do you think this town will rebuild?" And I said, "Well, we'd already talked to a contractor about rebuilding, and obviously we're going to rebuild." And And then I came home, or we were staying at my parents' house. I told my wife, I said, well, I publicly committed us to rebuilding. I hope that's okay. And she said, sure, what else would we do?
When did you decide that you were going to do it? Well, you know, we didn't have any thought process in that we weren't going to build back. This is our home. This is where our children were raised. This is where grandparents lived. This is where grandkids came back to see grandkids. There was never any question of whether we were going to rebuild or not. We just did it.
So rebuild they did.
Shout out to the Red Cross. They had a mobile food truck. Best food in town.
Both President Bush and Governor Sebelius had really let people in their agencies know, help these people rebuild and do a good job.
The real goal was, how do we sustain the community for future generations? We're going to rebuild. Well, let's do it in a right, prudent, and responsible manner.
High efficiency heating and cooling systems. Some buildings have solar panels, some just have basic stuff. Putting the thermal pumps, we felt like we helped some of the new technologies really learn how to be improved and then be adopted later on for building around the nation. The geothermal systems, ICF foam blocks.
How did our pioneering ancestors handle it? You know, they were the original, quote, green people.
Nearly every house and nearly all the public buildings have safe rooms.
All of the buildings were constructed to be energy efficient.
Our superintendent was wonderful, and he said the next time we have our school, he said we're going to have a school.
My freshman, sophomore, and junior year, we went to school in FEMA trailers. And that was hard in itself. If the wind blew, they were trailers, they rattled.
But what came after the trailers was spectacular.
I teach math here at Kiowa County High School in Greensburg, Kansas. I saw these whiteboard tables and it's just been my favorite. I wanted to come back and just make the town better than whenever I was here. Clearly, since I became a teacher, I liked school.
Wow, this is a good looking gym.
My favorite part about it is, like I said, the natural light.
I mean, this is amazing.
There's not a single light bulb on, and
it's so bright.
It's so bright.
Walk me through how many years did it take for them to build this? Do you remember?
I remember they started building in 2008, but again, I could be wrong.
Okay, and then you graduated still in the FEMA trailers.
In the FEMA trailers in 2010. We were the Greensburg Rangers then.
But then this opened officially
Yeah.
in 2011?
The 2010 school year.
Or 2010.
Into 2011, yeah.
Okay, and it was at that point the Kiowa County Mavericks.
Yeah. I was a little jealous, definitely, that they got to play.
That you never got to go to school
That I
here.
never got to go to school.
It's kind of cool that you're like a teacher
Yeah.
now, so you get to experience it and all of its beauty.
The whole name change thing was definitely a source of drama, though. Got to be the last Ranger class, made it a little bit like, I'm definitely okay with it because I got to graduate a Ranger. I wonder what the class under me feels like.
George Ryan manages the new Twilight Theater on Main Street. He moved to Greensburg with his wife from New York. He's the main man at the projector, the box office, and the concessions counter. And of course, the theater's historian.
Your great-great-uncle Charles Spainhour opened the Twilight Theater 100 feet down there where the U.S. Post Office is now. It was destroyed by the tornado of 2007, and after raising money, construction started in 2012. It opened in 2015 in April, 7 years ago.
Wow. So this is a place for the community? What goes on here?
It was built for the community. It's an auditorium. It's a stage that's 70 feet wide, bigger than most Broadway stages. State-of-the-art movie theater, and we do a lot of things for the community here.
The city's main attraction would be rebuilt into a museum with a meteorite return to its display. Electric charging stations lining the parking lot.
So this is 109 feet deep. 32 feet across. So Kendall, tell me about the last time you actually came to the well.
So it had to have been probably, gosh, like March 2007, because I was here visiting my grandparents over spring break.
Okay.
And so I went home after spring break, and then the tornado happened early May, May 4th, so.
Right, so you had just been here right before. What do you remember? Because when I came and worked here, it was always dark and smelly.
Yep, dark and creepy and cold the further down you go.
Right.
But obviously now, after it was rebuilt, you can't go down as far, which is kind of sad because, I remember throwing pennies and quarters down here and making wishes on them, much like every other kid does. This is my first time being back in the Big Well since the tornado. A brand new museum, a new theater, a new school, and a new downtown, but not everyone chose to rebuild.
If some people move away, that's okay.
It's an ongoing thing. Even 15 years afterwards, there's people that haven't come to terms with what happened.
What that means was Greensburg became a town of new houses and empty lots. And the orphan steps of the First Christian Church and the shadow of the Big Well show it's still that 15 years later.
Birds, that's something for a long time after the tornado we didn't hear. You didn't hear anything. Everything was gone, so it was just definitely quiet.
When you stand in the middle of Greensburg now, there's almost that eerie feeling because there are no large trees.
The sounds, the smell, the eerie feeling, all of what I took in after the tornado, it changed the trajectory of my life, but I wouldn't figure that out for a long time.
The Fox Weather app.
Make sure your Fox Weather notifications are on.
So much more than a forecast, always accessible.
You need to be watching and making sure that you are prepared.
We got a whole lot to talk about with this system.
Lightning fast, cutting edge, and best of all, tailored to your location and your needs.
We have several days to watch this.
Precise, personal, powerful. Fox Weather. Download the app now and make it your own.
You can jog the entire town of Greensburg in less than half an hour. It takes only a few seconds for the memories of the days following the tornado to come rushing back. And I had a rocky relationship with weather even before then.
When a thunderstorm would be coming in, she'd be nervous, she'd be shaking, she'd be crying.
When she was young, we tried to tell her that the possibility of a tornado or something really devastating would be very rare until it hit the town that their grandparents lived in. And then that blew that theory right out of the water.
When you're 10 and you see something like that, it's gonna stick with you. I felt this extreme fear settle in over me. So the next couple of years, I was so scared of storms. My dad knows every time like the tornado sirens would go off in our hometown, which was much like Greensburg, I would just have panic attacks to the point where it was like debilitating.
She had a hard time sleeping, and I knew that she had seen a cataclysmic sort of situation, and she was going to experience trauma. I know I did as an adult.
It's the fear of the unknown, and so I said, all right, I need to solve this by education. So I went to the local library, came out with a big old stack of books, and we plowed our way through and taught her a lot about the weather.
I remember going to the library with you and checking out books on all things weather, tornadoes. In particular, the book on tornadoes scared me to death. I couldn't even open this cover. I just didn't even want to. I had so much fear and anxiety toward it.
The more she learned, the less fearful she was. Knowledge is power. I could see the change was taking place, that with the education, that the fear was certainly not gone, but it wasn't as bad.
After John worked with her and taught her things about the weather, there's been a path all along. And I think she's found a great career.
Flash forward to 2019. I'm living in Columbus, Mississippi, when I'm facing severe weather yet again.
Several years later, during Kendall's first on-air job, her mom and I receive a text, "I'm about to be hit by a tornado." And literally, here comes that sucker punch to the gut again.
In that basement, All of the memories came flooding back to me, and I knew that I had picked the right profession.
Been an extremely soggy start to our work week. Monday, Tuesday, widespread showers.
She spent enough time in Greensburg growing up that this was part of her heart too. So I think seeing those images, seeing the importance of the first responders and how much their role in giving Greensburg a warning, I think really made an impact.
It's a job that's always changing and always exciting.
You have to tell your story. And people that tell their story and pass it on, if she hadn't have dealt with that trauma, she could still be a very struggling young lady.
People choose their professions for a variety of reasons. I chose mine to pay back the people who helped save my family.
Say thank you so much.
You betcha.
Appreciate it.
You go through a funeral process, through a grieving process of loss. And not just of lives, but loss of buildings, loss of a lifetime of accumulation. And once you get past that, then you kind of get into the healing process. And I think we're moving on. But everybody's dealing with it in their own way.
Well, I'm sure, if I was to stop and think too long, I could emotionally, come back to a place. And it doesn't take long. Doesn't take long to, build that within you, because it's still there. You'll carry it with you for the rest of your life.
And although most of Greensburg has been rebuilt, only half the population fully returned, leaving a patchwork quilt of a town with many blank squares.
I mean, Greensburg is a pretty cool town now.
There's so much to do here, but not a lot of people to do it with, it feels at times.
My kids, Addison and Trayden, have really been touched by Greensburg and its story. They still get to go to the old-fashioned soda fountain that I grew up going to. So there's enough of the old blended with the new, I think, that makes Greensburg really relevant for generations to come.
They can visit the Big Well or even catch a movie at dusk when the real neon lights of the Twilight Theater are shining bright.
Well, I think there's a bright future.
I could be here all my life.
It's a great place to live. We have excellent schools. We have a great hospital, good healthcare system. If you need a safe room, there's one that's not far away.
I'm Amy Freeze. Welcome to Fox Weather's YouTube page. We have more great videos on the way, so make sure to subscribe to stay updated on all things weather.